Hello there, I'm Jimmy Vegas and welcome to a brand new series of game development tutorials on how to make your own 3D platform game in Unity 6. This video tutorial series will guide you through everything you need to know, and I'll even provide you with all the scripts and the assets for free in each video if we use any. Remember to subscribe and click the notification bell to stay up to date with every tutorial I upload. Feel free to leave a comment and drop a like. I also have a Patreon page where you can help be a part of this channel, and you'll also find all the scripts and the assets to this series there too, along with plenty of other things. You can also now join as a free member. So the game we'll be building will be built from scratch, and we'll be making it completely free. No cost to you at all, as long as you put your mind to it. So who is this tutorial series aimed at? Well, it's going to be aimed at newcomers to the game development world, as well as intermediate developers. I will take you from a beginner level to an intermediate level by the end of this series. Even if you're a veteran to making video games, stick around just to see how we tackle some methods, and if you can use anything in your own games, and see what we can do to achieve the desired effect in some unique aspects of game development. The version of Unity we'll be using is Unity 6, however, this tutorial series is backwards compatible and will work in previous versions of Unity and will most likely be future-proof, meaning you can use it in all versions of Unity up and coming in the future as well. So this first tutorial will explore where to get Unity, how to get it on your computer, what the Unity Hub is, and we'll get acquainted with the engine that we can see right in front of us right now. So, firstly, how do we get the Unity engine? Well, all we need to do is go to unity.com/download. Once you're there, click on this download button right here. And what this will do is it will install something called the Unity Hub. The Unity Hub is a place that you can store all of your projects and all of your installs of the game engine itself. You should have something that looks fairly similar to this. Do note that you can use Unity offline, however you do need to log into your account every roughly 30 days or so. So don't worry if you have, say, intermittent internet and can only log on once a month. It's perfectly fine to use as it is. So this window here is the projects window, and you can see this is where all of my projects are currently stored. What we do need to do first off though is go to installs. Now this option here is where you can see every version of Unity that you have installed. At the moment on this particular machine I only have two installations, and that is 2022 and Unity 6. Like I said, we'll be using Unity 6 for this particular series. And how do you get Unity 6 on your machine? Well, that's easy. You just need to click on Install Editor, and you will see here at the top you have a couple of different versions. Now it's always worth noting that you should really install anything that is long-term support. That means that if there's any problems, any bugs or anything, chances are it might be fixed or patched in the future. There are other versions you can download, and there are also pre-releases, but I would always recommend going with the latest that has long-term support. In this case, it is this version of Unity 6. You just need to click on Install. Once you do that, you'll be given a multitude of options, but do make sure you have Visual Studio being installed. And if you want build support for different platforms, then you can select them here as well as languages. Once you've set everything that you're happy with, you would just click on Continue. And you would need to give it a little bit of time just to install Unity itself. It might take a bit longer depending on your connection speed. Also worth noting that anything we build in Unity can be ported to any platform providing you have the correct license, but we'll discuss that in a future tutorial. So once you have Unity installed, how do you get your project? Well, easy. Click on Projects, click on New Project, and then at the top, if you have multiple versions of Unity, just make sure you select the correct version that you want to use up here, in this case Unity 6. Select Universal 3D, and then give your project a name. It can be called anything at all, so it's your game name. Select where you want to save it, and if you're offline you won't need to select an organization or anything like that, but if you are connected to the internet you would just select your account and then you'd be able to create project. It's up to you whether you want to have a Unity Cloud or whether you want to have version control. I tend not to have either of these ticked because I mostly work a lot offline on this particular machine. So once you've got that set, click on Create Project, and after that you'll be presented with something that looks very similar to this. This is what you saw at the beginning of the tutorial. This is Unity 6. This is the engine. This is where we make our games. And if you've used any kind of engine before in game development, it will look very familiar. But what I want to do now is take a moment to explore all of this and kind of tell you what most of it is going to be used for, whether it's useful, whether it isn't so useful at the moment. So let's start off over here in the hierarchy. The hierarchy is a place where we can store all of our game objects. What is a game object? Well, a game object can be anything that we can see in this scene view. For example, we have a camera, and we can see right there that this is a game object. And if we select something in the scene view, it is also selected over here in the hierarchy. Same with this directional light and the global volume. We can select anything, whether it's in the hierarchy or whether it is in the scene view itself, and they are corresponding to each other. So you could think of the hierarchy as a way of keeping your game clean and tidy and seeing where all of your objects are. Going back to the scene view, what is this? Well, this is where we build our game itself. Using our mouse and keyboard, we can do a couple of things which are going to be very useful for us to make things quicker in developing. Mouse, scroll, in and out, nice and simple. You can select the hand tool here, and you can hold the left mouse button and move around. And if you hold the right mouse button, you can pivot around. So just using those couple of things right there, it's very easy to kind of get to where you need to go in your screen. There are a couple of other tools here that aren't particularly necessary at all times. Some of them are used more for 2D elements, for example, the Rect tool. We'll be using that a little later on in this series. But just keep in mind that the scene view is where we'll be building most of our game. The next tab along here is the game view. At the moment, nothing is there apart from blue and grey. But this is where we're able to play our game. This is where we'll test the game to make sure all of our mechanics work correctly. We don't need to build the game, we're able to play it directly inside the engine itself. The next tab along, you may or may not have, it is the animated tab. This is essentially a place where we can play around with animations, and it is combined with this animation tab down here, but we'll get to that in just a moment. This isn't strictly necessary at the moment, but we'll be using it in the future. Speaking of which, we can select these tabs, and we can also move these tabs around if we want to. By holding the left mouse button, we can bring this down here. And you can see that this window that was here is now still usable here. And on that note, we can also detach it and make it its own object. So if we just detach it, put it there, it's now its very own window. So let's put this back up here for now. Over here we have the inspector panel. And the inspector panel is a way of telling us information about anything that we have selected. For example, we have this main camera selected here, and over here we can see its transform component. That tells us its position, which way it's facing, or how big or how small it is. Every single object will have a transform component. Not every object will have a camera component. Each object will have its own different components depending on what that object does. For example, the directional light right here has a light component on. And we can add components depending on what we want to do. If we want to add a rigid body or if we want to add a collider, we'd be able to do that just by adding that there. But not every object needs something like that. Going back to the main camera, for example, the main camera would not need a light component because it's a camera, not a light. We can play around with all of these, but one thing to do note is that all game objects should have components which are relevant to what they are doing. There's no point in adding components that serve no purpose to a game object. It's wasting resources. Down the bottom here, we have the project window. And this project window is where we store pretty much everything that the game is built on, whether it's a script, whether it's an audio file, whether it's a model, whether it's a texture, everything will be down here. And we can keep everything inside folders, neat and tidy. The next one along is the console window, and this console window will tell us if there's an error. So if we've created a script, for example, and there's something wrong, it will tell us in the console where we need to look to sort the problem out. It's very, very useful, this. The final one here is animation. Again, you may or may not have this one. It just depends on what Unity has decided it wants to do, because Unity can be a little bit fun to play around with sometimes. But this one is a way of creating nice, simple, easy animations inside Unity. Let's say, for example, you don't have this tab, and you want it, you can change what you want here. So if I right click on the tab and close tab, it's now disappeared. These 3 lines here, you'll be able to add the tabs you want. So we can go to animation and add it back. And as mentioned earlier, you can move these tabs around depending on where you want to have them in your game. You can resize these windows as necessary if you want to have a larger scene view, like so. So what I would recommend is setting this screen up to how you feel most comfortable. I'm going to leave it pretty much as the default because a lot of people who are new to Unity don't want to scare themselves too much by changing things around and work most comfortably in a default setting. Only when they advance a little bit further do they feel comfortable in changing things around, but I guess everybody is different. Next things I want to look at is if we go to File, and then if we go to Build Profiles. This here, if we click on Scene List at the top, this is a place where we have all of our scenes. I will explain scenes a little bit more as we go into more depth in this whole series. But scenes are a way of creating, well, scenes, different areas, different levels. Think of it as a level per scene. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're restricted to one level per scene. You could create multiple. Scenes become very useful when you're changing from a menu into a level. So we'll discuss that a little bit more as we go on. And if we look down here, we can see that currently mine says Windows active. And I also have Android, for example, or iOS. Now, what this means is that this is our target platform. So at the moment, our target platform is developing for Windows, and you would effectively use this if you're putting something on itch.io or Steam. So this would be your build. Now, what it means is that if you want to build for Android, you would select Android and then click on Switch Platform. But that doesn't mean you're restricted to just Android at that point. You can switch platform at any point in development. In fact, if you've completely created your game and you're happy with it, you can build it, create it, you can then go to something like Android and switch platform and then build it for Android. That is how you can port any game in Unity to any supported platform, providing you have the license. For example, if you wanted to build for PlayStation, you would need a license, unfortunately. That does cost money to an extent. There's a lot of stuff to go into with that. So for now, we're sticking with Windows as our build platform. So that is the basic layout. That's everything we kind of need at the moment. But there's no game here. We need to start building a game. You know, we've come into this first tutorial. Let's start building this game straight away. So most games are built on game objects. Everything is a game object. So what do we do when we need to have a platform, when we need to have an area to run around on? Well, we can go to game object up here. We can go to 3D object, and we can go to cube. Cubes are fundamental to a lot of game building, whether it is a simple game, whether it's a complicated game, whether it is something like, I don't know, Tetris. Cubes are important because they're good building blocks for a lot of different things. Why do you think Minecraft is so successful? So this cube itself, we can rename to, let's say, ground. And if we take a look at it itself and zoom in, we can see over here we've got some interesting numbers here. Let's make this a little bit bigger. So the position, let's set that as 0, 0, and 0. The cube has now disappeared from screen. However, if we double click it in the hierarchy, it will refocus on our game. So now we can see it. This is dead center of our game scene. So 0, 0, 0 is the center. You can change the size of it if you want to. You can change the position. So if we change the size to 2 across and 2 tall, change the position from 2, 0, 0 to 2, 0, 2, and you can see you can move it around. A great thing as well is the ability to hold the left mouse button and move it around like so. So we can move this block anywhere we want, up, down, forward, left, right, backwards. We can change the rotation here if we want to, 45 degrees, 45 degrees, 180 degrees, even though that makes no difference whatsoever because 180 is the exact opposite. We can, however, use this and hold our mouse over, hold the left mouse button down, and we can move back and forwards to change any of these values. You can see if we do that, we change it quite easily. We can move its position. Positions, rotations, and scales are always the most important things to get right first whenever you're creating a new game from scratch. So in this case, let's reset this cube back to center, rotate it back to normal, and set the size back to just being a cube. So this cube itself will play a very, very important role in the next part of the tutorial. But for now, what I would recommend is getting your Unity interface exactly how you like it. Explore some of these options with the cube. And there's so much you can learn, so much you can change. You know, you can just play around with it so much. You could spend hours working with just one cube. It's great. Trust me, I love it. Anyway, the last thing we're going to do now is we are going to save. So if I hold Control and press S, it will save. We don't need to save as because currently this particular scene is already a scene that is open. Speaking of which, scenes are also assets, which is why it's in the asset window down here. Next tutorial, what we're going to do is we are going to import some information into Unity. We're going to import some textures, we're going to work with textures, and we're going to work with materials to start developing our very first level. Remember to subscribe and click the notification bell to stay up to date with every tutorial I upload, and I'll see you next time.